Lenny.
Hi, Nancy.
Welcome to episode 87 of the Front Porch Book Club.
The Front Porch Book Club is a podcast that meets twice a month.
We like to dig deep into the relationship between characters and the worlds they live in.
Grab your book and iced tea and join us on the front porch.
Well, Lenny, since we last talked, you've become a movie star.
I have.
Tell all about your busy life in the world of movies.
So funny. Okay, so now I know the lingo.
Oh, okay.
That was one thing I learned.
Okay.
I was an extra, but they're not called extras anymore. We're called background.
Okay.
York was the setting, and they were looking for background people. So I thought, well, that's something I can do. And so I put in my headshot, and I got selected.
Uh-huh.
And I got to be background, which was 12 hours of sitting in a room waiting. But we had free dinner, which was very nice.
Lovely.
And free drinks and snacks all day.
That's nice.
And we had air conditioning, which was very lovely.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a nice environment for the little bit of work. I was a town person that comes in and saves the day by signing a petition in a zoning hearing. And so I scurried into the courtroom to sign the paper. It was so much fun. I found a second gig for myself.
Okay, so how did you find the second gig now?
Well, I was talking to the people at the first gig, and I said, how did you find out about this? Because they were out of county.
Yeah.
And she told me this Facebook site.
Okay.
And I found my second gig. So this one's going to be a coffee shop. Free coffee for the day.
If only you drank coffee.
It'll be water in my cup.
Right.
And I just sit there and drink my water.
Maybe you'll be with someone and you'll like mouth conversations to each other.
Yes. And we can bring laptops and be very contemporary. They want a very contemporary seat.
Like the movie in York, will you just be wearing your own clothes and do your own makeup and hair and everything?
Oh, in York, they did our hair and makeup.
Oh.
And we had a wardrobe approval. And if they didn't like what you brought, they had other things.
Who knew that South Central Pennsylvania was like the Hollywood of the East Coast?
I had no idea.
When the movies are released, we'll definitely have to tell our listeners where they can catch them.
Not that I heard this from the producers. I heard this from somebody who is an extra a lot and has worked with this company in photography. She thought it was going right to streaming.
Mm-hmm. At what point will I have to start working through your agent to book times for us to record the podcast?
What I really need is a decent headshot. So I am having fun with that. You had lunch with the governor, did you not, for some kind of arts thing?
Last night was the governor's lecture for the humanities, and the author Amy Tan came to Nebraska and spoke. And my job, because I'm now on the Humanities Nebraska board, was to escort Amy around.
And how was that?
Well, that was so much fun. I had a good time just making sure she got introduced to people at the dinner, but wasn't overwhelmed. And the people who wanted to get pictures with her got pictures with her. And then afterward, for me, maybe the most fun was I sat next to her at the table as she was signing books. And there was a huge long line of people. I think the thing that most impressed me was she absolutely engaged with every single person, and people had stories to tell her about how important her writing has been to them. Some people were really kind of at a loss for words when they met her. They were just so starstruck, and she was so kind and encouraging. There were a couple people who came through who are aspiring writers, and she was very encouraging to them. just taking these conversations very seriously.
You know, Nance, every author that we talk to is just a lovely person, I think. We have gotten that experience.
And we also found time to read our book for October.
Oh, this is a podcast on books. I guess we should get to our
partially. At least partially. Our October book is actually a book that I've heard about for years, but I'd never read it. So I was really happy that we picked this one. The book is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. It's set in the late 19th century in what's now Nigeria, just as colonialism is reaching deep into tribal cultures. Previous to this book, most books about the African continent in English were written by Europeans, and they tended to promulgate the notion of Africans as savages or primitive cultures. So this book, when it was published in 1958, was groundbreaking in so many ways.
Yeah, what I liked about it is what exactly you're saying. You're coming into the book learning about their African culture.
Yeah.
You're learning about how they make decisions, what they think of the spiritual world, religion.
Yeah.
What is their routine? How do they live? What do they eat? How have they set up their own culture and society?
Right.
And so you're learning about that before the colonization takes place.
Yeah.
So therefore, you can see the stark confusion that they have when they see this white man, and I'm going to use their words. And the book says, well, they know what somebody who has albinoism looks like, and this person isn't that.
Right.
So they call him the white man before they get to know who he is and what he's about. And so you're seeing then this different culture coming into their place and how confusing it is for them. So that, I think, is the strength of the book. That's the part I liked.
I thought that part was actually going to be the main focus of the book. I was surprised how late the white man entered the story. It really wasn't until part 5, I think, that the British missionaries and civil servants really show up. We have much more than half of the book that we're just living in Igboland.
Yeah.
And we are learning all about Okonkwo and his family. We're learning about the village. There is not a hint of any European whatsoever.
Yeah. And I think the other books that follow this book, because I was surprised at that too, are then after this takes place. And so you'll see that evolve more.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved this introductory part of their culture and what life was like for them.
Because you really do understand the rhythms of the day, the season, family life. What happens when someone breaks one of the rules of the village? Who are the people who have the power?
All of that. It's just fascinating to me.
Now, what also is interesting to me about this book is it was written nearly a century later. So this wasn't a book written contemporaneously with these changes. The book was written in 1958. The book's set in approximately the 1880s, I believe. The interesting thing is Chinua Achebe is writing the book in the 1950s when that European colonization is actually disintegrating and African nations were becoming independent. So he's writing about the beginning of colonization at a time that colonization is going away. So put yourself in the shoes of European readers in the 1950s. What do you think would have challenged them most as they read this account of the initial colonization?
Oh, what a good question. I think it would give me pause to say, how do people do it well? And how do people do it poorly? So then we don't repeat the same mistakes. So what I thought of were what were the advantages, taking away positive things that did for the culture, and that were the negative impacts.
So what did you see as the positives and negatives?
I thought the positives were that the people who were fringe people, the people that were on the outside, the people that didn't have power, the people that didn't buy into they had their own rigid society too, some of it. The one son of Okonkwo is a disappointment. He is not really a warrior. He's not this big tough guy like his dad wants him to be. And that's what is successful for their village life, is that you have warriors who can protect your families and your crops and all of that. This boy isn't bent that way.
Right.
But here, this outside culture coming in, he actually is loved and accepted. And he is like, wow, God is love. Like he's ready for that. And that gives him a place and a purpose, still a part of his community, still a part of his culture, but his expression is different. And so it's great for them. It eventually becomes, for the people that don't have any power in their current culture, like the women and the children, Christianity provides a level playing field for everybody. You're all children of God. Obviously, medicine and all sorts of other wonderful things that come into play are positive outcomes. The negatives are probably disease and this sort of breaking away of tradition. Some of the traditions are horrible, like killing people.
Yeah.
That are innocent victims.
Yeah.
But then there's some really cool things that then go away too. So I'm curious, Nancy, what do you see as the positives and negatives?
Well, I think I tended to focus more on the negatives, the exploitation of the people and their environment. The first missionary was Mr. Kiaga, and he was someone who really learned and wanted to understand the traditions of the people, what their beliefs were. And for him, he was able to take their beliefs and explain to them how Christianity was a fulfillment of that, not a substitute. And Mr. Brown also compromised and was pretty good at that. The third, Reverend James Smith, the one who saw things as black and white, black was evil, the world was a battleground in which children of light were locked in mortal conflict with the sons of darkness. That's what we're told about him. Mm-hmm. So it's that perspective of you're evil, we're right, that I think so often happens in evangelism to other cultures. It's like, we have all the answers. Everything that you believe is completely wrong. And this is a wholesale substitution for that. And nothing you believe has any value whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, you really respect the first guy that's there. And he is definitely acknowledging the spiritual world, which they're completely immersed in.
Completely immersed in.
They know what sacrifice is. They know what atonement is. They know a lot about what Christianity talks about. And so he had a really good way of being able to talk to them and respect their culture and then share what his faith was as well. Any other negatives or positive, Nan?
Yeah, well, I was thinking a lot about the economics of colonization. So the missionaries come because they're interested in saving people who don't believe in Christianity. But why does anyone else come? Well, the reason Britain as a country comes is because they want the African palm oil that is available in Africa. It's a great lubricant for industrial machinery at this time. Of course, the Industrial Revolution. I did some research. After colonization, more than 16 million British pounds of palm oil was exported per year. So who is benefiting from that? I'm going to say that it was not the natives who were benefiting from that 16 million pounds of palm oil. This extraction of natural resources is a real problem. The fact that, for the most part, I'm going to say the natives were subjects to the British government and were never allowed or able to hold any roles of authority. There's a lot going on here. And what we're getting is just the very, very beginning glimmers of it, and the destruction of a way of life.
And again, the next book will be very telling as far as what happens to the different people here. Because we are seeing some people that live in Africa now that are being hired as interpreters and who do have position of authority in the new government. And so there are opportunities there, but the opportunities have to come with sort of a giving away of part of your culture, because Okonkwo's son goes away and learns how to read and be educated by the church.
So Okonkwo, he's the main character in the novel. He is respected throughout the 9 villages and beyond as a great wrestler and warrior. This really pleases him because we learned pretty early on he's trying to rise above the failures of his father, who was poor and really didn't find a place in the village. He preferred just kind of lazing around and playing instruments. And he wasn't a very good farmer, which in Igboland, you got to raise those yams because the yams are your wealth. And that's what's like literally going to feed your family. Okonkwo has 3 wives, a flourishing farm. So in any novel, when you meet a character and things seem to be going swimmingly well for them, you know that's not going to last long. Something is going to happen. When the character starts out, things are horrible, things are probably going to be looking up. For Okonkwo, he's starting out good. Also, the title of the book, Things Fall Apart. Another clue, things are going to start falling apart for him. He has arranged his life as a great man in his community.
He has a lot of respect and he's reached a certain level. There's different levels, which I thought were really interesting. And he isn't the top level, but he is making moves in that way.
Yeah. And everyone expects he's going to accumulate all the titles.
Yeah.
When, as you were reading this, did you think, things are starting to fall apart for Okonkwo?
Pretty late in the book, Nance.
Oh.
I want to hear your answer on this, but I'll answer it first briefly, and then I really want you to answer it.
Okay.
It wasn't until he was exiled, because he was living his culture. He was making the decisions based on what his sense of right and wrong was. It might not be mine, but he was successful in doing the things that he did because those are the things that granted him titles and prestige and power in his setting. So it wasn't until he was exiled and removed from that place of power that I thought, ooh, well, let's see if he can survive in a different place. Now, there was some extended family and it wasn't so far away. I mean, he could walk over there. I think it took a while, but it probably was in the same kind of region.
Yeah.
But he was still exiled. And then would that break him? In what way would that experience change him? So it wasn't until that point, which was pretty late in the book, that I thought about that. But I'm interested to hear your answer, because my guess is yours was earlier than that.
It was a little earlier than that. Okonkwo, he did mostly follow the rules of his culture, but he didn't always, because sometimes anger and fear got the best of him. When he killed Achebe, who was the little boy who had been taken from another village to satisfy the spirits and to prevent a war, he had taken him into his home. And the little boy lived there for several years. And Okonkwo loved him like a son, really. And in fact, really liked his influence on his own son.
Yeah.
The whole family just loved this little boy. But then to satisfy the spirits again, the decision is made that they are going to execute little Achebe. And it is decided that Okonkwo will go along, but he's warned not to be a part of the killing because that just isn't appropriate for him to kill someone who has lived in his household. Okonkwo doesn't show any love for anyone whatsoever. So no one knows how much Okonkwo really loves this little boy. But push comes to shove, and Okonkwo ends up being the person that kills little Akemefuna because he is afraid of being seen as weak, which is really his motivating fear, is being seen as weak.
Like his father.
Exactly.
So he doesn't want to end up as his father. So he always has this, I wouldn't say it's a chip on his shoulder, but he always has to prove to himself that he's not weak.
Yeah, it's like a bravado.
Yeah, the better said, yeah.
So when he kills that little boy, I think, oh no. Things are going to start crumbling. Now, prior to that, he did beat one of his wives during the week of peace, and that was a big stain on him. That was really frowned upon. Not allowed to beat your wife during that week. And he did because he was very angry with her. That to me, though, I thought it didn't seem like he really suffered too much in terms of consequence. I didn't think that was going to be it. But killing the little boy, I thought, oh, this is showing that he is allowing his own fears to direct him in a way that he is unable to govern himself. And things are going to start crumbling, I think.
Okay. So in that particular part of the book, you felt like the culture around him was saying you don't have to kill the boy.
And in fact, you really shouldn't. You know, an elder comes to his house and says, look, this is what's going down. You can be there if you want, but you should not be the one who executes him.
Mm-hmm. He seems sad.
Yeah.
And grieving for a couple of days, and then he just kind of shakes it off and keeps moving, which is one of those advantages, I think, for the church to come in to say, we don't need to kill little children to appease the gods.
That would be a positive. We don't need to kill children to appease the gods.
And we don't need to beat our wives. That was never for religious reason.
He wasn't getting his food on time. That's why he was beating her. I mean, that's a much more selfish reason.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think part of this book is a gender and generational divide that Chinua Achebe is playing with. Okonkwo doesn't value his wives beyond their obedience to him. We've talked about that. Nwoye is not the warrior that he wants as a son. In fact, at one point later in the book, Okonkwo thinks of himself as a roaring fire and his son as the cold, impotent ash that follows. His favorite child is his daughter. And throughout his life, he just is ruining the fact that she isn't a boy because she would be a great warrior.
They have a good connection.
They do, but she's a girl. So that's too bad. I wondered if some of these disappointments were gender and generational divides that Achebe is playing with, or if you think this is the classic tale of someone with low self-esteem trying to demean everyone else to make themselves feel better about who they are. Like, is it basic human psychology, or are we playing with generational stereotype? What is going on here?
Well, I think the little girl is interesting. I love that she's a character in this book.
Yeah.
But she is smart and she knows what her father needs from her, and she's able to give that to him. She knows how to appease the guy with the power.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what he likes about her, is that she knows how to feed his ego, but she also is interested in him as a person. That's a great thing for somebody who has a lot of ego and power. I didn't really take it as that. I just took it as trying to understand his culture and the person that he was, rather than trying to think of the generational differences.
Okay.
But I was totally interested in the traditional roles that people were playing. Where were the women in this? Where did they see themselves in this? Did they see themselves as powerless? You know, that kind of thing.
So the generational thing for me was reinforced pretty late in the book. Okonkwo, he's been exiled for accidentally killing a member of his village for 7 years. When he returns, he's appalled at the influence of missionaries. He urges his fellow villagers to fight them, and they tell him, and here's a quote, "It is already too late. Our own men and our sons have joined the ranks of the stranger. They have joined his religion, and they help to uphold his government." And Nwoye has joined them also, gone off to school. So for me, it's that idea of we've like already lost the next generation. He had great hopes for his son. They have been dashed. And it's not only his son, it's other sons as well.
So we're losing our culture. We're losing our religion, our ways, our customs, the way we make rules, the decisions about who we are and what we want to celebrate. However, he's lost his power.
Yes.
He lost it when he was exiled. He didn't have a voice so much where he went. Now, he was very successful. He ends up being very successful where he goes. So he knows how to make his life happen someplace else. He comes back and things have now changed. And the old ways, the rules, the customs, it's starting to disintegrate around him. I hear the grieving and the loss that he is experiencing and the confusion of, now we have to get together and figure out what to do about this. Like we have to gather the men around because they're the ones that make the decisions.
Absolutely.
And we got to figure out what are we going to do. Now, if I'm a person of great title, I'm going to start speaking my mind about what I think should happen. But other people have a different opinion. And I think he sees that he's losing maybe some of the power that he had even within that culture.
Yeah.
Because some people have already started moving away and they don't really want to take a spear and go get the missionary. Do we treat them the way we would treat another tribe that came in and got us? We know how to do that kind of war.
Right.
But apparently there are a lot of white men out there, more than are in our territory.
Right.
There's a whole lot of them. So maybe we need to figure out what's going on here and go over and talk to them peacefully first. So it's hard for all of them to try to figure out, what do we do in this situation?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Nance. New kind of emerging culture around him is upsetting to him. Do you have a perspective of the challenges of his thinking and his mindset and what that does to him?
Yeah, boy, he is someone who is not very flexible, right?
That's exactly what I thought too.
He is living through a huge transition period. Like the biggest transition period that continent has ever seen. So what do you need during periods of transition? Well, you need flexibility.
Yeah. Well, I think you need stability.
You need stability and flexibility, right?
Yeah.
Our boy Okonkwo, not very flexible. No. I think you need some sort of inner reserve that you can weather the storm. Our friend Okonkwo, he is driven by fear, by the need for power. And who is he if he doesn't have power? I think his answer is he does not want to live if he is a person who is not seen as powerful and a warrior. And if there's no longer an esteemed place for him, he doesn't want to be there anymore.
Because that's who he is. But he grew up in a culture where that was the thing.
The best thing to be.
You get a lot of wives, you get a lot of land, you farm a lot, you make a lot of money, and you get a lot of power and titles.
Yeah.
And that is living a pretty good life.
Yeah. That's as good as it gets.
He's getting there. And he is there. He does have wives. He does have farm. He is farming successfully. He has titles.
Yeah.
He has a lot to lose with this new group coming. Some other people don't have so much to lose. The women don't have so much to lose. The kids don't have so much to lose. They're in a powerless position as well. So they have a lot less to lose. Here's a person who has a lot to lose. I can certainly understand why he wants the old ways, the customs. He was successful in that.
Mm-hmm.
But you do see a very rigid person. He is not quite understood or come to terms with maybe his father was a good man.
For him, his father had no value whatsoever.
Right. It's kind of hard to know because you think in his culture, maybe he didn't have the titles and all of that. So what one person thinks is successful, that was what he thought was successful. But did other people see the value of this man for what he was?
No, I don't think so, because part of the reason they were also impressed by him is that he was able to come so far from nothing. And they considered his father's household nothing.
I forgot that. Yeah. I do understand the rigidity of where he is at has worked for him. And he wants to hold on to it because he doesn't want to give up on any of that power and influence and voice.
Right.
So I can understand him. Come on, village, listen to me. Let's keep with the old ways and follow me. I know how to do this. But it kind of trickles away from him as the book goes. So very interesting. Now, the author of our book once said that the great failure of people is to see other human beings as human beings. How do you think this book helps people see other human beings as human beings, Nance?
This book takes seriously the concerns, the dreams, the ambitions, the loves, the losses of these African natives as seriously as any European author takes seriously the dreams and ambitions of Europeans. And so I imagine that this was a book that was really surprising to a lot of people who maybe still even in the 1950s were thinking, well, they were just a bunch of savages. You know, there was nothing about those cultures that was of value. And this shows a fairly sophisticated civil system. It shows them as very religious people, very much adhering to their beliefs and following
whatever the gods say.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do, whether it makes sense to us or not.
Right. I mean, very faithful.
Yes, faithful people.
Yeah.
And faithful to their rules and their customs. And this person's sinned against me or in their custom, what would that look like? Now, this is what we do about that. So there's rules of governance.
There's a real commitment to community.
Yes.
This is all about our community staying together, staying strong. If a member has to be sacrificed to appease the gods in order for our community to go on, well, so be it.
Right.
And that's all such basic human behavior. We all have desires and dreams. We all sacrifice in different ways. You know, we're all members of communities that mean a lot to us. So I love that this book takes all of that so seriously and is so authentic according to people who are familiar with the Igbo people. This is an accurate representation of the culture at that time. And when the Europeans arrive, it's as jarring for the reader probably as it was jarring for those people. It's like, wait, what is happening here?
What are they doing?
Right.
Who do they think they are to come in here? Like, it's not how we do things here.
Exactly. Wait, they haven't gone to the tribal council. They haven't sat in the circle with the chairs. What are they doing?
Well, could you put me in jail? I don't understand and beat me.
Yeah.
Like, what did I do?
Exactly.
Oh.
And I thought the ending was so poignant. Spoiler alert, Okonkwo has hanged himself. The district commissioner, who is in charge of that area, he's the European in charge of that area, is shown Okonkwo's body. And as he's thinking about this, to him, unknown person, but one of the leader rabble-rousers is really all he knows about him. He thinks, maybe I'm going to write a book about my experience here in Africa. He thinks a great title would be The Pacification of the Primitives of the Lower Niger. And that Okonkwo's story, he's kind of interested in this guy's story. It would warrant, quote, perhaps not a chapter, but a reasonable paragraph. In that, there is a human being not seeing another person as a human being.
Right.
That sums it up.
Very powerful line that the author writes. It's just so heart-wrenching to read that. Hear the person who this whole book was about, his culture, his people, his life, his children, his wives, kills himself. For that to be said of his life, just so sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's what the author is trying to get across, is this was a whole life and a whole group of, tons of people. His life mattered and it was important. And he was successful.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for him.
Overall, did you enjoy the book? What's your thought?
Oh, I love the book. In fact, just talking to you about it now, I am interested in maybe reading that next one.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's based on Okonkwo's grandson is the main character. Is that right?
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So we're going to jump ahead a bit.
I think
and
so.
See how this carries on. I was thinking maybe we would follow his son and see but I guess there will be information about what he does and how he raises then the next generation. It was hard to get into. I wasn't sure what this whole thing was about at the beginning, but I loved hearing about the old ways and what worked for the people. So I liked that part of it very much. Nancy, you said at the very beginning that you had heard about this book. You had it on your reading list for a long time, just never got around to it. Now that you've read it, what do you think?
I really loved it. I loved the seriousness that Achebe affords the Igbo culture. We are totally immersed in that, the good and the bad.
Mm-hmm.
He does not make it Edenic, but he also doesn't condescend to it. It's people trying to figure out how to live in the world.
Right. And the world is complicated, even though you have lots of tribes around you. There are different cultures and there's different hard feelings here and there and different wars and trouble.
And, he could have picked a really sympathetic character to be the protagonist. He could have picked Okonkwo's good friend who had very good relations within his family, treated his wives very well, had successful children. But he didn't. He chose someone who really had a lot of rough edges, who could have been a better man. And I think that was an interesting choice, to choose someone to illustrate the loss of this culture who in some ways was not that nice of a person. It almost seems as an author, well, you choose someone who's really wonderful, and then we mourn the loss of that culture for that sympathetic character even more. But he doesn't do that. He gives us a very, very flawed man, and yet we still mourn the loss of that culture.
Yeah, we still do. And we still feel bad for him at the end.
We sure do.
He wasn't able to get there based on what he thought was important in life. And it's a really sad ending. Okay. Well, this was fascinating, but we need to bring in an expert, Nancy.
Let's.
These are just kind of our thoughts and our feelings of it, which I think it's really for us. It's for people outside of their culture to step in and say, what happened to this group of people and what was their livelihood. But we're going to bring an expert next month to shed some more light on the subject.
Yes. Thanks for listening, everyone. Our website is frontporchbookclub.com.
Our episodes come out twice a month on the first and third Wednesday of each month.
See you next time, Lenny.
Okay, take care, Nance.